Thank you for listening to the BjjBrick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back to the BjjBrick Podcast. This week, it is episode 341, and I'm going to take you down a road that hasn't been covered yet. We're going to talk about takedowns. Yeah, you like that, Byron?
That's smooth, Gary.
Smooth. As usual, I got my partners in crime, my good friend Joe Thomas out of Houston, Texas, and Byron. And so, hey, how are you guys doing today?
Doing good, buddy. How are you?
Doing great, good buddy.
Awesome. Good to be talking to you tonight, man.
Yep, I'm glad you're here.
Awesome.
And I'm here as well.
Who?
And, yeah, the other guy, Byron.
Oh,
and,
Byron.
Oh, that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me on here again, guys. And
Always nice to have you, Brian.
Well, we have to let you on, Brian. You're the one who owns this.
well,
It's your podcast.
it's
So, but yeah, you want good content, so you invite us and pay us very weekly.
weekly, huh?
Definitely weekly. Sometimes I don't think you're a very good businessman, and that kind of reminds me of a quote from Orison Swett Martin, and he said the golden rule for every businessman is this: put yourself in your customer's place. So, Byron, you are the owner of BjjBrick LLC. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Oh man, you really turned this on its head during the takedown process.
I took it down on its head. I slammed it.
Yeah, we are customer focused in this podcast. Mostly we serve the vast majority of our customers. Just show up and aren't actually, they're receiving a benefit of the podcast, and we do like getting the word out there and sharing what thoughts we have about jiu-jitsu to them. But if I were to say, like, I guess customers that buy the audiobooks or that support us on Patreon, I do lean a little bit more towards them. If they come with me and say, hey, I need something, or I have a question about your audiobook, or today we're going to pull some questions that we got from the private Facebook group with our Patreon supporters on there. So the actual customers versus just the listeners. We love our listeners, and they are the backbone of what we're doing. This if you boiled the podcast down to just the people who helped contribute, it would be a very small number, and it would be kind of odd. But they are supporting the few that do. Help us on Patreon are supporting the entire show and helping support the many listeners that get the benefit from the podcast. So we definitely do focus some stuff towards our customers of the Patreon supporters and the audiobooks. We've interviewed coaches of Patreon supporters sometimes on the recommendations. They do get our ear a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, Byron, I mess with you all the time, and I'm messing with you earlier on the show here. But, I know when you came to me to do this podcast, and I know your sole focus of this podcast is to help our customers, our listeners, our Patreon supporters. I mean, your goal is to spread jiu-jitsu. You want to help people in their jiu-jitsu journey, and you do that. You put yourself in our customers' place. And, I'm not saying customers just our Patreon supporters, but, I'm looking at everybody that listens to us. And that's your goal. You gear everything towards that. And I can honestly tell you, I joked here a little bit about being paid weekly. I don't think I've ever been paid.
No, you have not. You definitely have not been paid, Gary.
Yeah. But I did once get a gi. I've got a couple of shirts and, just cool stuff like that. But I can tell you, especially earlier in the show, we had people who wanted to advertise on our show. And Byron didn't just take the money. I remember a couple times you turned people down and you said, hey, really, what does this do for our listeners? Does it really have much to do for us? And, I respect that, Byron. You're not just looking to make a couple bucks and, shut the doors and go on vacation. You could care less I mean, I know you want to grow this into something, and shoot, you have grown it into something pretty darn big, but your sole focus, it's not on me, it's not on Joe, it's not on your schedule, it's on, the listeners, on trying to grow the sport of jiu-jitsu across the world, expose more people to it, get more people training, and when they're getting through some hurdles and pitfalls, trying to help them over that hurdle, trying to push them up the wall and, give some advice. So, Byron, you do practice the golden rule according to this guy.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Gary. And I do like how you flip that on its head, and I was kind of babbling about who our customers are. Really, anybody who's listening to us is paying us with their time and their that's one of the most valuable resource we have. So if you're listening to us, thank you for that, and we're happy to have you on this team. And you talk about money.
If it was me running it, I'd just take the money and run. And hey, as soon as somebody paid me, I'd shut the thing down. So that's me.
We are. Yep. I doubt we're the largest jiu-jitsu podcast. Probably not anywhere close. But I would probably say we're the largest jiu-jitsu podcast. Without a sponsor, we're Patreon, we're listener supported, and I think that's our goal. My thought with this quote, and let me run this by Joe to get him involved in this thing because I just keep rambling about this. As a businessman or a woman if you're running a gym, you need to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the person who walks through the door the first time, or the person who just got their blue belt or pro belt, or the person that just had a tough time of rolling, and see their point of view from, as your gym, as a member of the team. And I think that's a good place to be. If you could imagine what it's like to walk into your gym the first time and you can't imagine a little bit of nervousness, you're not doing it right. People are nervous walking into a jiu-jitsu gym for the first time.
Yeah, so I think this is something that everybody strives to do. It's something you should strive to do, but I also think it's something that some people are just better at than others. And people that are good at it, I think those are the people that are going to be successful. I think the people that are really passionate about what they do are good at it. A guy that's a mechanic that just works on a car 9 to 5, different people bring their car and it's just a job. He may be a pretty good mechanic, but a guy that does like custom builds, and when people bring it in, he's just passionate about giving them the best product that he can, and he puts a lot of time and effort into talking to the owner. What are you looking for here? That's a whole different animal, and those guys are generally pretty successful. And I think the same is true with jiu-jitsu. You got to really be passionate about it. You got to have a passion for passing on the knowledge. Here again, to pat you two on the back, you guys have been doing this a lot longer than I have. Nobody spends the amount of time that Byron and Gary have spent for 5 or 6 years doing something they're not passionate about. There's no other real fringe benefits here, except it's not like we're being recognized on the streets and we're celebrities. So
you're not.
I don't.
Well, remember when we were voted the the number 1 or number 2 ranked podcast, martial arts podcast?
I will. Yes, and we probably still are number 2. But I will say I was listening to another jiu-jitsu podcast this week, and they've been around for a shorter amount of time, but a little while, and they're doing pretty good. And it caught me off guard when I heard, well, like they always say on the BjjBrick Podcast. I was like, what?
Man, those guys are all right.
Yeah, and then they actually mentioned your audiobook, Byron. So you've had some contact with these guys, but it's good to see that
Joe, let's give them a shout out.
Yeah, it's the BJJ. What is it? Let me find it real quick.
Joe listens to so many jiu-jitsu podcasts.
I do. It's the BJJ campaign, or the jiu-jitsu campaign.
Cool.
Does that ring a bell?
Thank you,
with
guys.
You? Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Shout out to them. Check their podcast out too. We're here to grow jiu-jitsu. They're doing the same thing, and we appreciate the shout out.
Yep, similar to ours. So if an hour and a half or 2 hours of jiu-jitsu BS isn't enough for you in a week, go check them out too.
Oh, that's funny, Joe. And if this cup of tea isn't your flavor, there's other ones out there that don't include Gary.
I'm actually drinking some tea right now, Byron.
What flavor?
Green.
Oh.
Just straight green tea, huh?
Yes, sir.
Good for you, man.
Well, I'm excited. Joe has been kind of brewing on this off the mat lesson for a little while. Joe, what do you have for us, my friend?
Okay, I was watching a couple skateboarding videos a couple weeks ago. I do on a regular basis, and occasionally that leads to skimboarding. And then I was watching some surfing videos, and I ran across a video. A local surfer YouTuber was meeting up with Kalani Robb to go surfing. And Kalani Robb was up and coming, hot surfer on the competitive tour back in the probably late 80s, early 90s. So I'm guessing he's about 50 now. And anyway, so they meet up, and back in the day, Kalani Robb was, always the best guy in the lineup and always set the bar high. And if you were surfing the same lineup as he was, that's the guy everybody was trying to be like on that day. A really good surfer, really good competitor. But by the time I'm watching this video, of course, he's 50 years old, and I'm kind of curious to see what he's going to bring. And he goes out there, and he's just having fun, and he's kind of goofing off, and he's trying weird things, and wiping out, and it's just no big deal. And in this little video, they surf a couple of different spots, and you see them kind of interacting with each other. And at one point, they're walking down to the beach, and there's two 13-year-old kids, and they don't even recognize Kalani Robb, but they're walking down the beach too. And you got to wax your board, put wax on top so your feet will stick to it. And they hadn't got their boards waxed correctly, so he takes a few minutes and he shows them how to wax their boards and gets them set up and sends them on their way. And I'm watching this, and I'm just kind of thinking about how his role in the surfing community has changed, how he's adopted kind of this new role. And when we talk about the role that you play in whatever social circle we're talking about, or your work, I think what we're really talking about is what you contribute. And it's a social human need to contribute to whatever group you're a part of. And if you started doing jiu-jitsu before you were 40, in your 30s or in your 20s, there's probably a point in your jiu-jitsu journey, most of us, where we play a role like they might say, if you want to know if you're in competition shape, go roll with Byron, because if you bring it, he's going to bring it, and he's in great shape, and you'll know at the end of a 10-minute roll if you're ready or not. They say, hey, if you want to know how your sweeps are coming, roll with Gary. That guy's got the best base in the gym. He's light, he's nimble on his feet, and if he doesn't want to get swept, he's not going to get swept. We play those kind of roles as we're, in our younger days, and very enthusiastic about jiu-jitsu. The problem is, if we continue to try to play those roles, our bodies will fail us. And it's not good for your health long term. It's not good for your jiu-jitsu long term. And so you got to find other ways to contribute. Maybe you become that technical guy that's got a vast knowledge of different techniques, or maybe you become that guy that they say, if you want to talk about pre-competition jitters in preparation, talk to Gary. You wouldn't know it now, but back in the day, he used to compete 20 times a year or something. I just think, I wonder, as you see guys get in their late 30s, 40s, their purple belt, brown belt, and some of these guys just fade away, I wonder how many times it's because they've sort of got to that point where they need to transition, and it's really hard. It's not easy sometimes to become what do they call us now, boomer? Okay, boomer. So it's not easy, but I think it's necessary. So as two other old guys, what do you think about this?
You talking about you and Gary as the old guys, or?
I'm the young guy. I'm the boomer.
Okay, boomer.
Now, what were we talking about? No, Joe, I love it. This whole thing reminds me of when I interviewed John Will, and he talked about a cat having 9 lives, and you have to be willing to make some decent-sized transitions in life and think of yourself as almost a different person entirely as you do these things, as you change careers, as you change on the mat, as you go from a competition-based time on the mat to somebody who maybe is doing a coaching role, or maybe from somebody who competes a lot to somebody who owns a gym. Those are different roles, and those are really different phases in your life. And I remember John Will, and I've interviewed him a couple of times, I don't remember which one it was, but when he said that, I really latched onto that and learned a lot from that particular interview. And and I often think about that, because as I'm getting older or changing, or my schedule changes, or my time I spend with doing work things, I have to try to balance everything and try to make sure that the scales are moving, but I need to make sure they're moving in a way I'm happy with, and not just adding more pounds. So I think that's a great example, Joe, of this person. And you said, I forget how you worded it, but we have a desire to serve the community we're in, or to, would you say on that? I love that when you said that, because.
Yeah, if you talk to psychologists or read some of that stuff, there's like certain basic needs that we all have, and contributing to society or to our social group or whatever, that's just a basic need that we have. And I think sometimes, I've heard people be like, I'm just not getting out of jiu-jitsu what I used to get out of it. I'm not as excited to go anymore. And maybe sometimes it's they're frustrated with their progress a little bit. But I wonder also if they're just sort of needing to transition to the next phase, and it's not easy.
Well, Joe, I thank you kindly for bringing that off the mat lesson from I guess it's the surfing world to the jiu-jitsu world.
That would be correct.
Yeah, you say these names. I know some listeners know who the names are, much like if somebody mentioned Marcelo Garcia on a surfing podcast. That really, people would be like, what? But, I'm sure some listeners know who the gentleman was that had the great surf history.
I'll bet you jiu-jitsu guys have as good a shot as naming at least one professional surfer as they do naming professional basketball or football players.
Yeah. Didn't Byron have trouble with that already?
Yeah.
Which kind of sport?
Well, what was that? I guess that was Gerald talking about how you don't know anything about sports.
Yeah, that is accurate.
It was nice for Gerald to pick on you for once instead of me.
That's true.
Yeah.
And he's doing that in the Facebook private group that is for the Patreon supporters, and we'll be talking about some of their questions they had later on in the topic portion. And I think that's a good time to get into this takedowns.
Yeah, I think we should change levels there, Byron, and get on over to talk about some takedowns.
So, Gary, let's just do that. We have some bullet points here. And takedowns, if you are in the BJJ by the month group, you can go to Facebook and find it there, or you could just go to the BjjBrick website and find details about BJJ by the month. We pick something by the month, and we train it. We kind of focus on that for a month, and then we'll transition to something else. But just, Gary, can you explain to me what happens when you change levels and why that's such an important thing to do for so many takedowns?
Well, the first thing is, let's say you're in a basic stance. First of all, your stance is the first level of defense, to get taken down. But basically, I have to get to your waist. I have to get below you. So, a lot of times what I'll do is as I will change levels, I'll get a little bit lower where, then I can attack. I may attack your ankle. I may attack your knee. I may attack your waist, depending on, how low can I go. That sounded pretty cool. How low can I go? But no, I have to basically break your ties, break your grips, get underneath that, so I can attack you.
Yeah, you want to get in there to where you can get control of the legs, get control of the hips, and prevent the sprawl or changing levels is such a fundamental part of the wrestling style takedowns, and it's something that a lot of jiu-jitsu players suffer from. They just kind of lean forward at the legs. Not a good idea. We need to control these level changes. If that's a style of takedown you're wanting to do. Well, guys, looking at this, takedowns as a sport, we do get some fairly good criticisms or critiques from other martial arts or from just within the community itself, as a lot of jiu-jitsu schools really don't have a good system of takedowns. And I wouldn't say that about, like it would be weird to say, yeah, a lot of schools, everybody has really bad mounts, or the guard passing isn't a focus. These main parts of jiu-jitsu, we cover those in our schools. But takedowns, a lot of times, they're just kind of overlooked. Where do you guys think that is?
Hey, before we get to that, I want to touch back on changing levels, because
Yes.
I don't think you guys touched on this. I think it's important. Yeah, you want to change levels so you have access to attack their legs or their ankle or something like an ankle pick. But even in judo, you have to elevate your opponent. You have to get him light on his feet in order to get his feet out from underneath him. And you can't do that without getting below him. Does that make sense? Like when you do a judo throw, you turn into it and you get your hips underneath their hips.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to add that. Everything you guys said was correct, but I thought that was worth adding.
Definitely a good point.
Why are takedowns weak at jiu-jitsu schools? Is it partly because they got popular, or jiu-jitsu schools got popular enough that the mats are often crowded? And once you start a few matches on your knees, maybe you get lazy. Sure, it's a lot easier, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought I've got a couple different reasons why I think this, but one of them, Joe, was kind of like what you said. Jiu-jitsu has become popular, and a lot of schools don't have a ton of mat space. I've been in very many schools where you're basically crammed in like sardines. You're back to back, and maybe everybody can't even roll at the same time. You have to switch up. People are on the sidelines waiting to come in, for the next round, and people are subbing out. And I guess that's good. That the popularity in jiu-jitsu is getting more popular, and more people are signing up. But I do think that is one reason. You got too many people on the mat, it can lead to injuries, tripping over people's legs, falling on people's legs. So I do think that is one reason.
One thing I saw when I trained in Brazil that I don't think I've seen at any of the schools I've trained at up here is it was really common during the open rolling portion of the mat for the instructor to clear the mat and then just start doing matches. Having two guys come out and do a match, like a short, high-intensity match, and then, kind of like that, or maybe two groups. And I just don't see that kind of thing too much here.
I wonder if that even goes back to our golden rule, think like the customer. I could tell you myself, if I was at a school and to be honest, I want to roll. I don't want to sit out. And I would. That might turn me off a little bit. I do like the idea. You're getting a high intensity roll. I do think that could make you better, but everybody's different. Not everybody wants a high intensity roll. Some people just want to go out there and flow roll for, 30 minutes. So I do think maybe that could put some people off. I'm the guy, I can't roll very many days a week. It goes back to my body, as I get older, and it goes back to time commitments with work, family, sports, school. And, so when I do roll, I have a certain time frame, and I want to roll every round I can and as much as I possibly can in that short amount of time.
Well, we'll just keep starting from our knees then.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying I even like to start from my knees, but in a situation like that, I do think a crowded mat, could lead to it. Other things I've thought of is rule set. Shoot, if I'm not going to get penalized for pulling guard, and a lot of people are really offensive off the guard and sweep off the guard to get to where they want, and pulling guard, entangling that leg, or going for the sweep, you're not penalized for it. It works really well. I know a lot of people don't like guard pullers and, talk smack about it, but I have no problem with guard pulling. I think it's part of the sport. And, if that's your specialty, and you're good at it, more power to you. It may not be as fun to watch, especially for somebody who doesn't know jiu-jitsu, but it's a way to get it to the ground, to get your opponent in your so-called wheelhouse, where, if I'm a leg locker, I can, entangle a leg, or if you were talking earlier about somebody who's a very good sweeper, can sweep at will, I'm going to sweep and come up in top position.
I want to go back a little bit to what Joe was talking about. One pair of grapplers on the mat going fairly hard, and everybody else just waiting their turn or watching. And I'm thinking, I don't think I would like that either. But would there be any benefit to that? And I think that there would be an opportunity for the benefit of Gary and I roll. Gary hits me with a straight ankle lock, and match is over. I go sit down in my, sit down. Maybe I sit next to Gary and talk to him about it, whatever. It might force more reflection on what just happened. What did Gary do just before that setup of the ankle lock? Versus I go roll with Gary, great roll, then I go roll with Taylor, then I go roll with Joe, then I go roll with Jake. And sure, Gary hit that ankle lock on me 25 minutes ago. I can't remember any, I think that was Gary that did that to me.
Well,
so maybe there's a benefit to that in some
your ankle
degrees.
Would be so swollen by now.
That's true. I probably got shot down and had to go home. But I think it might force a little more reflection onto the roll. Although, saying all that, I do favor lots of rolls versus very few rolls. But if that's the situation you're in, I think you could use it to your advantage and try to get the most of it.
There are positives to it, especially a really competitive school. I like what Joe was saying. It's a high intensity, short time. It's getting you out of your comfort zone. It's getting you in front of everybody. You're starting on your feet. You got to take somebody to the ground. It's going to help you. Definitely will help you. I just don't know for a person like me, that what I'm looking for. I don't know if it's really the best thing for me, but each person is unique. Each person is different. And, but there are positives to it. And I think there's negatives to it also.
Well, it's a way. All I was getting at is there are ways that you could, as an instructor, do things to start more matches from the feet, even when it's crowded. You could even take a third of the mat and say, we're going to do one match at a time on this third of the mat. These guys are starting from their feet. The rest of the mat's open. You guys go ahead and get some rolls in. I'm just thinking that as a sport, if we want to encourage takedowns, there are ways we can work them into our trainings and our open mat sessions, even when it's crowded.
Yeah. Joe and I, way back in the day, we flew to another continent, Australia, to be exact. And we happened to be walking through the desert, and we found a little city there, and they had a cage. They called it Thunderdome. And what it was is 2 men enter, 1 man leave. And Joe and I, we bowed out. We decided we didn't want to take the chance, but it's kind of like what you're talking about, Joe.
Yeah. Hey, remember when we were walking through the desert and we had that horse? What was its name?
The horse with no name?
Oh, that's right. It didn't have a name.
You guys are terrible. Oh, man. Okay.
Make sure you see Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
Oh, man. Yeah, Gary, movie recommendation for the week is Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
I give it 2 thumbs up.
Wow. That's all the thumbs you have, and then we can't ask for anything more. I think other things with takedowns not being great in jiu-jitsu is, there's no real easy way to say it, and I'm guilty as anybody. Sometimes we're kind of lazy on the mats, and I could roll for a decent amount of time without getting tired. Not because I'm so great at jiu-jitsu, but because I'm able to keep a pace that's reasonable, but not above where I want to be, because the other person isn't pushing me that hard. And when you stand up, at least some degree of the laziness is gone. You do have to work. You have to wrestle for it. You have to fight a little bit more. Much like if Gary is 90% past my guard, I got to work a lot harder than if Gary is stuck in my guard. If I want to take a break, one's a good spot, one's a disaster. And same thing if we're just standing there and kind of working and feeling each other out, that's okay. But if I'm defending a takedown, I'm working hard, and I just think that takedowns are a lot of hard work, and sometimes we're not looking to do that as much on the mats, and you guys both hit on the safety aspect. A room full of people, it's hard to work takedowns. Like that's what's cool about wrestling is it's done in our school systems here in the United States. And we have gymnasium, like a giant area of mats, and you can get a bunch of kids on there, and they could all have plenty of space to work their takedowns, but not worry about landing on another group, and it maintains safety. And I do think that as far as statistically, the takedown is a pretty dangerous part of what we do. As far, not getting hurt. I don't, in my years of training since 2002, I don't think I've hurt anybody bypassing their guard. Like, no injuries. I'm 0 injuries on my guard passes. Maybe a few.
Oh, wait. Oh, Byron, you've never passed anybody's guard.
I said that one on the tee for you. In attempting to pass somebody's guard. Oh, Gary. But, some things are a little more injury prone than other. I think that takedowns are probably up there. And so for, the more of a guarantee, which nothing's guaranteed, but the more safer train, it's just easier to start from that safer position and avoid that. But that does catch up with us over the years as we, as a community, a lot of times just avoid that part of the game. And it's something that it depends why you're doing jiu-jitsu. If it's a hobby, if it's to get good for competitions, if it's for self-defense, all these things matter. And I've seen people with average wrestling games use their wrestling in jiu-jitsu matches with a ton of success, just because their opponent didn't have that skill.
Byron, you just talked about self-defense, and could you imagine, to an untrained person, he goes up to Joe and pushes Joe and challenges Joe to a fight.
I can imagine that.
And Joe ducks. Joe grabs him by the shirt and pulls guard. Could you imagine, like, the thought going through that guy's head, like, what the heck just happened? And then next thing you know, Joe sweeps him and he's on top. But when you were talking about self-defense, Byron, that just popped into my head.
Would you pull guard in a street fight, Gary?
To be honest, I love takedowns, but I would definitely pull guard in a street fight. I would take his leg home. I figure nobody's going to actually know what I'm doing. First of all, I'm not going to get in a street fight, but second of all, I would be worried if it's a one-on-one fight. I don't think I'd have any problem. I think AR would be in the advantage. This guy's going to have
let me help you out here, Gary, because it does sound weird. Gary would pull a heel hook, and it would be like that's. I would imagine that's, or maybe a straight ankle lock, but like it wouldn't
like
be
like the way Ryan Hall does it.
Yeah,
it would be fast if I had to guess.
No, I first of all, I think, and I'm not advocating this. People say it's stupid for a street fight, but man, I just can't imagine, like, before I started jiu-jitsu, when I got in a fight with somebody and they pulled guard, I would be stunned. And in that minute of stunnedness, if that's even a word, that person who knows what he's doing, I'm in major trouble, I think. But I mean, I don't think it's the smartest decision, but for me, I don't think I would have an issue with it. I really want to be on top, but I don't know. Call me crazy, but I think I could do okay pulling guard in a street fight.
I'm sure you could, and we're digressing here. I'll get back on this subject at hand later. But the one thing you talked about, like, before you knew jiu-jitsu, if somebody pulled guard, you would have been stunned. And I think that's a big advantage that people had who knew jiu-jitsu 15 and 20 years ago.
Yes.
But somebody that picks a fight with you today, they've probably signed up at a UFC gym at some point, or they've watched UFC ever since it's been out, and they fight with their brothers and their cousins in their backyard. So if you get in a fight today, I don't think you have that element of surprise as much as we used to.
Well, I still think you do. We hang out with like-minded people, so we hang out with people who do jiu-jitsu. But I still think nobody who hasn't trained, and still I think the majority of the people have never trained this. And, I can tell you, before I started jiu-jitsu, I watched UFC 1, UFC 2. I was an athlete. I was in the gym all the time. I thought I was pretty good. I would practice on my dog and my wife, guillotines. I thought I was pretty good. I really did. And I went to jiu-jitsu the first day. I got destroyed by people half my size, and these people were terrible back, compared to what jiu-jitsu is today, where people, the access to training and good teaching and stuff like that. And I don't know. I still think that the majority of the people would be surprised and have no clue. People think you watch these, World Star videos and stuff, and people putting on guillotines, and they think they have a good guillotine on, and we're looking at it like that's flat out garbage. So I don't know. I just think unless you really put some time into it, you are going to be surprised. You are going to. Just like day one when I went into the gym, I got destroyed.
So, Gary, let's answer this question, because the whole takedown thing is valid for the idea of a self-defense. Like, if you sign up for jiu-jitsu for self-defense and you can't get the fight to the ground, even if it is like, let's say you can't get to your opponent or your adversary on the ground, the whole jiu-jitsu thing is kind of messed up. Like, you need to get it in there. So, barring you, because, I don't know how to talk up your leg game any better. We've both been training for about 18 years. If Gary's attacking my legs, he's usually submitted me with that. Like, I've been training for 18 years. He's light years ahead of me on my leg defense, on his leg offense. Street average Joe on the street is going to have some serious damage to his leg. But Gary, you have a particular skill set, a set of skills. Try to do the Taken guy.
I give Taken 2 thumbs up.
But, okay, let's say you've got a buddy who's been training for 6 months, and for some reason or another, he tells you he's worried about, someone's going to attack him on the way home. What kind of advice would you tell this friend, besides trying to avoid it at all costs and that sort of thing? Would you tell him, maybe you should pull guard? Or would you say, no, you need to get to the ground?
I would never tell anybody to pull guard. I think it could be very dangerous. At that point, I would say get some boxing first, but here we are, we're talking jiu-jitsu. So you have to, you got to be able to take this thing to the ground. And you take let's take a guy we've had on the show twice, Roy Marsh. He's really big into self-defense, and I love watching his YouTube channel. Everything is 100%, well, not 100%, but geared towards self-defense. He's got striking in there. He's got the old stomp kick and, the stomp kick to clinch, early Hoist Gracie stuff. And, that stuff's great. Byron, our first instructor, was really big into that.
Yeah, that was good.
I still got those lessons from today, basically burying my head against the guy's back so I can't get hit with a stray elbow, stuff like that. But yeah, you need clinch work. I don't even know if, a double leg blast, if a street fight may be your best thing, because do you really want to put your knees on the concrete? I know my first instructor would always talk about, there's glass and rocks or whatever down there, could hurt yourself. I kind of like, Joe, I know a couple of weeks ago you were talking about, getting to the back, arm drag or something to get to the back and go for a takedown from there. I think it's pretty safe in a street fight. You're at the back, you're not going to get hit. There's going to be those rear elbows maybe coming, but you got access to the neck. You can trip from the back, do a lot of different things.
Yeah. So I think that's a good point as far as, getting something to the ground. And Joe, you alluded to it before, or maybe it was Gary, I don't know. If the person's alone.
It's probably Joe.
So if Joe tackles me in a fight and Gary's on my team, okay, Gary be on Joe's team. That's clear.
Oh, yeah.
So if I tackle Joe and I'm on top of him, I still have no way to defend Gary. So it's not always, there's no blanket statement about self-defense. Like that, I would have just put myself in a terrible spot. Even on top, even in mount, Gary can come up there and assault me at free will, and I'm in so much trouble. So obviously the blanket statement of fighting is a very bad thing. It's very dangerous, and there's a lot of variables that can't be controlled. Avoiding that, like a good set of running shoes is probably a good plan, and an ego that could take it. Anyway, guys, we talked about it briefly. Starting from your knees, any strong opinions about this one?
No, but I'll say one more thing about takedowns and self-defense, because I was thinking that I am not going to go to the ground at all if I can avoid it. If I have a little experience boxing, if I can use a jab and footwork to maintain distance and keep people from getting behind me. I don't want to go to the ground at all. And Byron, when we were talking about what we might cover in this show, and I don't think it made it into the show notes, but you talked about one of the benefits of really working on your takedowns is you develop really good takedown defense. If I get in a scuffle with some guy that stumbles out of a bar drunk while I'm walking past it, and he's wrestling and pushing and shoving, I want to be able to keep that to the feet and control him and not end up underneath some big drunk guy.
I like what you're saying there, Joe. Really not going to the ground, probably not a bad idea at all. But, you started talking about scuffling with that big drunk guy. And a lot of times it becomes a pushing match. And, maybe the first haymaker is thrown and you kind of end up chest to chest pummeling. And also I kept thinking is that drunk guy is in trouble if he gets a hold, if he's with Byron. I'm telling you, Byron has a very nasty foot sweep. And I've been on the receiving end of that many times. And, I could imagine a guy who's drunk at a bar, doesn't have his total wits to him, getting in a clinch with Byron. He's going for a ride. And, same thing. I know we didn't necessarily want to talk about self-defense. That wasn't our goal here. But, man, studying judo, judo throws, you're talking you don't want to go to the ground, but you want to disable your attacker. Man, I've seen some of these judo guys throw people, and you may not get back up, especially on concrete or, hard ground.
Yeah, Gary, I never thought about what a great takedown a foot sweep was for a self-defense situation because you put your opponent on the ground and you have the choice. You can go on the ground with him. You can go
you can get
on belly or walk away.
Yeah.
But, man, sometimes a double leg blast or some takedowns, you're just all entangled when you get there, and that's not always great.
Yeah, and what I'm thinking about, we go into Byron's situation. Normally, the untrained guy is going to be very aggressive. He's going to be coming forward. He's going to be putting all his weight on one foot or whatever. And Byron's just going to, Byron he's got a really freaking great collar tie. He gets behind that head and you think you just tied up with a freaking silverback. And, he moves you around with that collar tie. This guy's going to be aggressive coming forward. Byron's going to move you exactly how he wants and then kick your feet out. And, I mean, you go flying. I went flying numerous times, and you're stunned. But a guy with, being very aggressive, his, let's say he's drunk, he's not going to have a stability. He's going to get some frequent flyer miles.
Gary, I don't want to interrupt you. You're talking so nicely about me, and none of it is. It's all nicely exaggerated.
It's not exaggerated. Definitely not. Or either that or I flat out suck.
Oh, man. So,
and I do suck.
No, you've been working your takedowns a lot this past while now in your wrestling. And sometimes I'm just watching, I'm like, man, Gary's getting after this. And I'm impressed by not just your work ethic, but where you're at now with your takedowns, and like anything, I have a few bricks: the foot sweep, arm drag. The list is kind of short, guys. I don't mind grabbing a single leg either. Anyways, starting from your knees, and this kind of can be a pet peeve of mine if it's done incorrectly. And so if two students are in a crowded, mat space, for me it's appropriate. You can start from your knees if you want. That's cool. What drives me nuts is when they decide to both want to play top game, and they just sit there on their knees and they lock up shoulders or whatever, tie up, and they just push each other around. And usually the bigger one or the one with the better base ends up getting the other one onto his back or her back. It's like knee wrestling. That's not what we're doing here, guys. Yeah. We're trying to start the match on the ground in a safe manner. And so starting on your knees, you might as well... here's how I do it. Starting on knees, cool. I give them about 3 seconds to decide if they want to work the bottom or top game. If Gary's still on his knees in 3 seconds or so, I pull guard. It will work for my guard. If Joe still has things for a little while or so, maybe I'll put a side control or half guard or turtle or something to get the round started and not fight from our knees. I'm not going to fight anybody from my knees. It's not a real thing, and it's not fun either for me. I don't enjoy that part of training. Any pushback on that, guys, or what do you guys think?
No, we've had this conversation before. I think I'm 100% in agreement. And I think, Byron, you gave some examples of how to deal with it. You just sort of going for a lazy, like, double leg or whatever, and your opponent has time to go to your side, and there you're in turtle. And, I mean, you just kind of force the action. You don't necessarily get the best position, but you don't waste 3 minutes knee wrestling.
Yep. I took advice from Byron many years ago, and I spent a couple years, I'd slap your hand and I would start side mounted, you know, and I look at it this way, my partner, no matter what, is getting work, from side control, trying to submit me or move to another position or whatever, hold me there. And I'm getting practice trying to get up from side control and get to a better position. And it's helped my side control, whole side control escapes. It's helped my training partners work from the top. And, I've started from the knees before, and I used to always, when I first started, I thought that was what you did. And it always seemed a little weird to me, but everybody else did it. So I did it. But man, once I started doing that, I try to start every round. If we're not starting from the feet, either on bottom side control or something like that, Yeah.
I think different groups, and maybe it has to do with how the instructor runs the school or the classes or whatever, have more or less of an issue with this. And where I train, there's not really an issue with it. And one of the things that is really common, if you're sort of in that scenario where the mat's pretty crowded, but maybe a few people are starting from their feet, a lot of people are starting from their knees or whatever, it's not usually from your knees. You'll say, hey, you want to roll? And they'll say, yeah, how do you want to start? And if it's not from the feet, it's like, well, I'll take closed guard, and okay, so let's go from there. And that completely bypasses that.
Good point.
Yeah, I think that the knee battles are between two people who both want to play a top game. And at some point in time, you're kind of being an unwilling training partner. One of you needs to work on that part of the game, and one of you needs to do something else. And I gotta say that Gary ain't lying. It was it was over a year he played side control to start his rolls, and man, for the first couple of months, it was some fun rolling. Gary just gives you side control. After a while, it really didn't matter. You couldn't attack him. He would escape so fast. It was like, well, let me do that again. That was a matter of seconds, and he really picked it up.
It goes back to what you were talking about. When I knee wrestled, I really wanted to be in the top position because I cared so. I wanted to win. I really did, and I wanted that top position. Once I started figuring out that I want to learn, I want to get better. I get better by knee fighting. Really isn't ever going to get me better. But starting on the bottom, or let's say you wanted me to start on top side control. Those are going to get me better. I'm now working a position. I didn't waste 30 to 45 seconds of the round knee wrestling until I got a top position or till the other guy got top position on me. We are now, making this role more efficient and effective by, already starting in a position where we can both work something meaningful.
All this stuff with the BJJ by the month, I put a video out talking about takedowns and that sort of thing, and Joe mentioned it before about not getting taken down as part of the system. And I think that's a big accomplishment. Maybe Joe and I pair off, and Joe always gets a takedown. And I try, and sometimes I get guillotined or sometimes I get close, but I don't really get it. If at the end of the month or so, I could defend most of Joe's takedowns now, or a lot more than I used to, that's awesome. That's a big step. So it's not just the art of taking someone down. It's being able to not get taken down, which is another part of the equation. And it's often overlooked, as I'm just thinking, got to shoot him, got to take him down, got to do my job, got to get this top thing going on. that's not necessarily the whole equation. We need to also be hard to take down in this process. And I've seen that with you, Gary, as you've been drilling your stand-up game with a couple of partners. It's like, man, you guys do some really beautiful takedown defenses and getting out of some tight spots that I know that if I was in there, yeah, I'd be on my back. So that's been fun to watch. Thinking about any training, or maybe just it's the same as it has been for years, but over the past month of doing a little more takedowns than we usually do, anything that you learned about this or any new favorite takedowns emerge?
I revisited a few things. And I'll say one thing about the concept that I think I've seen already. If you really, really want to take a deep dive into something, it's going to take more than a month.
That's true.
Yeah. So I'm kind of looking at this. I guess if I was a white belt, maybe I would look at it from a different way. But as a purple belt, I'm looking at each month as a way to just focus on things that I'm already at least somewhat competent in and improving on them. And from that
Good point.
So from that perspective, it's working out well for me. So I went in, drilled fireman's carries one day. I went in. We had a guy training for a tournament. We wanted to drill some takedowns. Went in with a couple guys and drilled them. And just tried to start more matches from my feet. And so it's been a good month so far.
I told Byron this last time I saw him at the gym is I love wrestling now. I mean, I really do. I mean, I've been working on my takedowns a little bit longer than this, but, I can tell you both my training sessions this week have been 2 hours long, and they have been 2 hours of 100% takedown only, no nonstop, just open mat for 2 hours straight, takedown, and then restart and going full blast. And I'm loving this. I was telling Byron, shoot, I almost just want to go straight wrestling. I won't do it though, but maybe just Joe, you were talking a little bit earlier. You said something about the transition stage when you were talking about the life lesson.
Most wrestlers, when they start getting older, they want to transition to jiu-jitsu because it's a little easier on the body, Gary.
Yeah. No, but what I was getting ready to say is, I think I wasn't looking forward to jiu-jitsu as much. It's been a really stressful year with work and stuff like that, and maybe I'm overtaxed or whatever, but I can tell you in the last 6 months, last year, I haven't really been looking forward to as much to jiu-jitsu, and which is weird because normally I'm 100% the other way, but this kind of like what you were saying, you transition to a new thing, and maybe I'm stupid, or not stupid, but crazy to transition to wrestling, but I don't know. It's almost like I found a new thing that is fun, and it goes right to my jiu-jitsu. It's not totally outside the norm. At one point, I was actually thinking of maybe trying kickboxing or something, just something for different. But, for some reason, I ended up focusing on wrestling, and it's kind of given me a new life. Jiu-jitsu is always my main thing, but, what the heck? I mean, even though I'm not doing as much mat work because we're just doing takedowns and then starting over again, all this still pertains to everything in jiu-jitsu. When we're tying up and, I'm trying to off balance a person, it's no different than me being in a butterfly guard, working for hooks and trying to get a sweep. It's just, we're doing it standing versus, me in somebody's butterfly guard.
Yeah, Gary, you have been hitting this hard, and I'm inspired by your work ethic.
Well, I'm still not very good at it, but I have fun, and that's to me what matters. And I'm learning. I am better than I was, last year. I am better than I was last month when we started this on February 1st. I am better. And for me, that's what, as long as I'm getting better, and well, I guess even if I stayed the same, I wouldn't mind it. As long as I'm having fun and learning, it's a plus.
Cool. Well, one thing, so when we start a new month, a new topic, and Joe's right on as far as, is a month long enough? Yeah, probably not. I'm still working. When I get my guard, our last month was submission-oriented guard. I'm still, like, I was surprised with how much my guard is a sweep-oriented guard. I'm like, man, these submissions are super hard to pull off. And so when I'm playing guard work, I'm still working on that submission-oriented guard. Like, it needs to be dusted off more than a month's worth. And now that when I am standing, I'm working on these takedowns. One thing that has stood out the most and has been the easiest and most effective change that happened just really quickly is Justin Rader in a video. So I threw together a bunch of videos that I think were helpful with getting your takedowns off to a good start. That's on the website, BjjBrick.com, under the BJJ by the month. And Justin Rader is showing, popping the head is what he calls it. When I picture that, I picture somebody popping the head like, is it like pop? No, like just pop with your hand. and it makes them blink. It makes them react a little bit, pull back a little bit. So just before I shoot, before I change levels and engage and try to take that penetrating step, just pop them in the head a little bit with my hand, and it just makes them flinch a tiny bit. And it's increased my percentages a lot.
Yeah, it goes back to what Joe says. When you're popping them, first of all, maybe they're getting out of their stance a little bit, but they're getting off balance. Maybe all of a sudden they're now back on their heels, kind of like what Joe said. You're getting under them. You've got them off balance a little bit, and makes a big difference there.
Hey, I love that, and I do that a little bit too, Byron. But here's another trick. When I was younger, I was a big Bruce Lee fan, and I did some Taekwondo, karate stuff, and I found that if you slap your thigh with your hand, you can almost every time just quick backhand your opponent right in the face. It distracts them, even though they're looking at that hand. It just bam right in their face. And the same thing I find with grip fighting. I'll oftentimes use that same technique. If they've got their right hand forward or my left's forward, if I just smack my thigh and then grab it works every time.
Joe, did you get that from? I know you're talking about Bruce Lee, but I've seen the video like that from his brother Brock.
Oh yeah, and what's his nephew Coley? But he didn't have the same last name.
His last name's Flower.
That's right. Yep, same guys.
Yeah. Yep.
Bring in your A material today, Gary.
Yeah. Oh, that actually bombed. I think that was like C- material. But I just wanted to make one point real quick. You guys were saying it's not enough, maybe to take a deep dive. But the cool thing is, even if you just do it for 30 days, or a month, man, we're learning stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I said, I can tell you I am better at takedowns than I was on February 1st. And, my closed guard, I worked, last month we were talking about, I do have a guard, offensive oriented guard. So I actually tried to work closed guard and go for arm bars from the closed guard, which I never do, and trying to throw triangles up there, which is something I don't do a heck of a lot. And I tell you, my triangles got better, and I've actually, I don't hit a lot of triangles, and I can say I've hit some triangles this month too. So it did make my game better. So I can tell you, just by a little, 1 month focus, and I have got better, in my guard and my takedowns.
Cool. And so before we started recording, I asked my wife, I said, Becky, we're doing an episode on takedowns. Do you have a favorite takedown, or what are your thoughts? And she likes to get an arm drag, and then she'll be able to work from and try to get the back from there. That's her most confident way to try to get to a dominant position and take somebody down. She does also like people to shoot on her. She's got a really good guillotine. But about
she's got a nasty guillotine.
About the arm drag, she said it's a lot of fun, and if somebody's bigger than her, which most are, she could do the moving. She has to move around that person, and if she's bigger than somebody, she could make them move. So the same move basically will be effective regardless of the size of the opponent. And then she also says when they try to arm drag me, I arm drag them back, and it's kind of fun. We kind of spin around in a circle. She enjoys that. That's just some of her thoughts. She's a white belt, and she's getting better every day. But those are kind of her thoughts about doing a takedown.
She not white belt because she's awesome. I'm telling you, she is very, very technical. She has really tapped me out with that. She's got a weird guillotine, and she's patterned her game around there, and she's caught me in that numerous times.
Well, Gary, just don't shoot in on her. Stay on the outside.
Yeah. Well, I like to knee wrestle when
that's
going
true.
at it.
That's a little safer. And one more thing about kind of our takedown game, Gary, I really liked watching you work. I think you were working with Mike, and some of your takedowns were just kind of pulling them down and threatening that guillotine and making Mike react to that. I thought, man, that's really smart. That's kind of a jiu-jitsu style, like a way to do things. You put him in a submission almost from standing, and then make him work from that. And I thought that was, man, I should do more of that. That seemed like something that even I could pull off, perhaps.
Well, what's crazy is, I come from a basketball background, and I was always the smallest guy in the court, and, at 5'11". And in this sport, I'm kind of a taller person, which I've never had my whole life. So, I do a lot of snaps off a collar tie. That's always been a game. I snap and, try to get a go behind. But I mean, if they don't protect their neck, it does leave a guillotine open. But, normally I'm just snapping, checking the arm and, taking the back and spiral right and do control, take back control.
5'11". Is that what they call you, Big Gary?
I've never heard anybody call me Big Gary. And for obvious reasons.
Man, okay.
Yeah.
That's fun. All right. We have so what we've done is we went to our private Facebook group for the Patreon supporters and asked them, hey, you guys, we're doing a takedown episode. Any thoughts or questions? And you guys did not disappoint. And I'm going to take Claudio's. He's a training partner of mine. And he says when he practices takedowns, and mostly with Bill, and I know Bill, and I'll explain that in a second, he gets tired very fast. Anything else he can do cardio-wise to help with this? And first off, I got to say, Bill is a deceptive grappler. Bill is a very competent wrestler, and for the past, 6 years or so, when you start to do jiu-jitsu with Bill, he pulls guard, and he works a really cool overhook style of close guard. It's a nightmare. But Bill has all the skills and capabilities to out-wrestle 98% of the people. Maybe not, that's a bit high, but vast majority of people, he's a great wrestler. And I know his dad was a great wrestler. And so I don't know if Claudio knows that about Bill, because when you roll with him, you would never guess it. He doesn't do sweeps that are wrestling sweeps. He does really nice jiu-jitsu style sweeps. He does jiu-jitsu style submissions. Like, he's not wrestling anymore. But Claudio, you lock up with Bill, and he's very hard to work with as far as to take Bill down. And I would say try just to calm down a little bit. And if you're getting tired, opposed to saying, I'm done with this, maybe take a short break and ask him a question. He's super helpful. He's more than willing to show you what he did right, or maybe what you did wrong, and help you gain from that. And just by asking, hey, what was that? And while you're learning, your body is also recovering, and it might get you another round or two of doing a couple more takedowns with a great training partner. And then also vary it. Maybe you grab me for a round, and I'm not going to be able to work you nearly as hard as Bill as far as getting you tired, and it's going to seem easy. But Bill's a great one. He's definitely an asset in the gym, and he's often a bit of a surprise asset because he doesn't rely on his wrestling when he's rolling. He's out there having fun and working on his guard game a lot. So good question, Claudio, and I feel like I had to take that one because I know those guys so well at Fox Fitness.
Hey, I've got something else for Claudio. Any physical activity that you're doing is going to be so much more exhausting when you're doing it inefficiently.
Yes.
And so the more you practice your stand-up grappling, the more efficient you'll become at it. And some examples I would throw out is if I'm trying to control Gary with I've got a collar tie with my right hand and I've got his right hand in my left hand. So I've got a wrist control and a collar tie. If my right ear's next to his left ear and my arm is in a really strong position and I've got his other hand sort of in a weak position, that's pretty efficient. And I lean on him and I put weight on him and he's going to have to work hard. But if he gets away from me and my arm's sort of straightened out and I'm still collar tying, now I'm pulling with my arm and we're having this battle and it just becomes much more exhausting. So work on technique and continue to do it. And as you get better at it, it will become less tiring.
Good one, Joe. I like that.
Yeah,
and,
I like it,
100% right.
You know, I'm going to take a question by Jake Fox. He said, do you think the current rule set in the sport deters the development of the takedown aspect? And we kind of touched on that a little bit. And I do think it does. You take judo, you get an iPon, it's over. But jiu-jitsu, you can pull guard. And, like I said, I'm not against pulling guard. I don't think anything's wrong with it. If you like it, go ahead. So I'm not trashing guard pullers. But I do think when you do have, a rule set that really doesn't deter you from pulling guard, I do think that the rule set can detour you. However you say the word.
Take a detour.
Yeah.
Hey, Gary, I completely agree with you, and I think most people would. But one thing I'm really happy about is even though a lot of people in the jiu-jitsu or more specifically in the grappling community in general, as people recognize that, one thing I'm glad they didn't do was like say, okay, we've got to get rid of all the rule sets that allow you to pull guard. What they did instead is start to add other rule sets. So if you want to get better at takedowns, if you like takedowns, you can find competitions where there's a lot less guard pulling. On the other hand, if you like guard pulling, so I'm glad we've done that.
Yeah, I like that. I never thought of it that way. But, yeah, I mean, there's so many different tournament venues out there. You can go to a submission only. You can go to one that penalizes you for pulling guard. You can go to a wrestling tournament. So, you can pick the rule set that you really like.
I don't know of any competitions that do this, that have points, but just imagine if you scored a takedown and you didn't get any points for that. That would be just one more step the other way. Still, it might be a great strategy to spend the time and effort and some risk in getting the top position, but to get no point for that because you end up in guard maybe. That's neutral position. You earned a neutral position. No points. Like, could you imagine that? Like, that's at least we get points for our takedowns. That's some incentive.
Yep. You know what I like is I went to watch one of my coworkers' kids wrestle the other day. He's 12U, wrestles for the local team, Kansas Young Guns, and he ended up, on his club there, a tournament. He went 2-2 in this tournament I went to, and he's a first-year wrestler, wrestles novice tournaments, and he's very aggressive. And afterwards, he's really competitive, and he ended up losing, and he was pretty upset with himself. And I like what the coach told him. The coach came over and told him, he's like, I see that you're upset and everything, but you got to remember you're a new wrestler. This is your first year, but he's like, you have so much potential because you are shooting. I can teach somebody who is shooting, somebody who is aggressive, somebody who's taking shots. Basically, if you're going to do that, he's got the confidence to do it. He will do it. He's not afraid to do it. And I think what the coach was meaning, somebody who's not afraid to take shots and put themselves maybe in a bad position, going for that risk versus reward. He's like, I love that attitude. He's like, I can turn you into a very good wrestler in the future. And I just thought that was a cool little talk that his coach had with him.
Yeah, that's awesome. He's moving in the right direction. Your effort is there. Let's work on the technique. Looking at other questions here on our Facebook private group, Allison, she says, "Why am I so bad at takedowns?" And then
I think we all are.
Yeah, is it necessary to cross train judo or wrestling or that sort of thing? And then what are some jiu-jitsu specific takedowns that would be good for beginners? It's not necessary to train anything. It's what you want to do. And you've already signed up and are doing jiu-jitsu at a jiu-jitsu gym. You know how much, I don't know where you would find a wrestling gym that, that's not tied to a school. I'm sure they're out there, but it's less common. A judo place, I guess that would be an option. But really, the odds are that the talent is in the room with you. And you do say, you're talking about it's kind of scary or intimidating. And I totally feel that. Like, I've been picked up and taken down hard, and I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I don't want to get launched and dropped to my head or neck or back real hard. And so part of this is find the training partner who will work with you. And hopefully there's a good skill gap there where they're able to teach you stuff. You're not two new people trying to, learn takedowns, but you have somebody who's quite a bit better than you. But if you do it right, they'll let you land some of your takedowns. They'll let you complete them. And then they'll also, when they take you down, you don't feel like you're in danger. They're under control, and there's some good back and forth with your training. And so, if you're feeling like it's too scary or too intimidating, and maybe try somebody else. Find that person, or maybe just talk to that same person as like, hey, can we slow this down a little bit? Or I'm not even getting close on takedowns. Can you maybe let me get a little bit further, or coach me midway, or something like that? Sometimes just a little conversation will help a lot, because the takedown game is there are so many levels to it. There's not just the one Gary talks about changing levels. It's much like jiu-jitsu, all the different belts and stripes, and even just because some of us are wearing black belts doesn't mean that we're nearly as good as some of the other black belts that just got them, or some of the brown belts, or like there's a lot to it. So find the right person, talk to them, and just know it's not going to happen overnight, but fairly quickly, much like jiu-jitsu, much like Allison, if somebody doesn't know jiu-jitsu, you hop on their back and you choke them. Pretty easy. Much like if somebody doesn't know wrestling, even some basic wrestling or some basic takedowns, it's going to be fairly simple to pull off. So don't be discouraged, and just work with your teammates a little bit more. And I think they're there in the gym with you most likely.
So Jake had another interesting question here. Asked if we watched the failed flying triangle video. Did you guys watch that?
I did not. I really didn't want to see it.
No, but dude ended up.
I know that. Yeah, I know about it.
Yeah. And so his question is, do takedowns lessen the risk of this type of catastrophic injury? And I know Jake's just trying to give us something to talk about here because he probably knows. I'm sure he knows more about this than the three of us put together. But in my view, I think you just kind of start from your feet. Just has its inherent hazards, and they're different from guard pulling than they are from takedowns. But you just have to recognize they're there and be safe, and work around them.
I also did not watch this video. Man, I sometimes I feel like I'm really not doing my part as a online citizen. My social media is very limited. I just don't have a lot of interest in watching videos forever. But anyway, so this person attempted a flying triangle and they had a catastrophic injury, he says.
A neck injury, I believe. You end up upside down and falling on your head. So I've actually seen several similar things to that. And then I've also seen the guy on his feet getting his knee blown out when people try and jump cars.
Sure. That's nasty. Yeah.
That hurts to watch. I mean, I've only watched that on accident before. So yeah, there are definitely dangers with guard pulling of any type. But I've also seen a guy suffer a really bad broken leg defending against a trip.
Yeah.
So
I would say, to answer Jake's question directly, having bad takedowns didn't cause this person's injury. Attempting a flying triangle did. And take that part of your game and consider if that's what you want to do. I'm not doing any flying triangles, flying arm bars. I could do a flying butt scoot. I don't know what to. I'm trying to think of something to add to flying, but his takedown game didn't get him injured. It's his decisions that he made on his feet that got him injured.
Let's go to Jamie's question.
Yeah.
Why don't people like to train takedowns? And I think we've hit on a couple things. The risk factor. Allison talked about people find them scary and intimidating. We were talking about injuries that could happen. Byron, earlier you talked about the amount of energy it takes to take down a resisting opponent. I think those take into it. But, I can tell you when I first started, I did not want to train takedowns. And what it was is kind of like why I didn't want to train leg locks. Everybody had told me that takedowns are dangerous. People had told me leg locks are dangerous. And so I was really, starting at 35, it kind of made me a little intimidated. I don't want to get hurt. I got to go to work. And, for myself, I can tell you that safety factor was why I didn't want to train them really. And I can tell you now that I'm training with them, I guess I've just now taken out of my head that I might get hurt. I know when I first started training with them, I would take a really cautious shot. And, to be honest, I think when I was being so cautious, it would lead to more injuries. So now I just kind of go and just train and try not to think about it. But for me, I think those are the two reasons, the injury factor, people are intimidated maybe. And then, just like what Claudio said too, and Allison, Claudio said, a gas and, when you get really tired up there and, and Byron, you were talking about it, that, it's a lot of energy to try to put that person on the mat.
Another factor that might be playing into this, Jamie, would just be it's a bit of an ego thing sometimes. You could be a blue belt, purple belt, black belt. You have a good wrestler come in, tie that white belt on, and you want to work that takedown game. There's a good chance you might get put on your butt, taken down in a pretty dramatic fashion, and your belt's not going to help you. and how many times, versus just pulling guard, and now you can't take me down, and now I'm working my game anyway. And it's just, sometimes it's a little frustrating to, just mentally people, let's do this, I want to get a takedown, and then spend 3 minutes with somebody who has almost no jiu-jitsu experience, but plenty of grappling experience, and just feel like, man, I'm frustrated with my own game, or maybe a little embarrassed, because most of the time when I'm training takedowns, it's later in the class. A lot of the members are sitting out around or are wrapping things up, and they're done, and inevitably more people are watching you grapple than in the beginning of class when everybody's on the mats, and you have to be willing to get made like a fool a bit sometimes, Gary.
Yep. Byron likes to wait till the end of class to train his takedowns, because that way the parents are coming in to pick up their kids from the kids' class, and Byron will actually ask them to train, and he has better luck against untrained people.
It's a good plan.
Yeah,
but usually it'll have to be in the parking lot because they're trying to just avoid the whole situation.
Did we read the last question on the list yet?
Get it, Joe.
Yeah, so we have one here. Is it Rolo Polo? Is his screen name?
That's what he's going by. Yeah.
Would you guys think he's related to Marco?
No, he's probably not related, and he probably couldn't find him either. So, anyway,
all day, Gary, you're all day.
All day. Anyway, he's got a question for us. This starts out by giving us a little backstory. He says, "I've been to several schools in Northern Virginia, and none start standing up. A few have wrestling or takedown class, and when they do, it's just that. How do we change, even if little by little, to do open mat or live sparring starting standing up, even if it's just a small section of the mat space for those who want to start standing up?" So I think what he's asking, guys, is how do we kind of reverse the culture of the trend?
Awesome question.
It is a good question. So,
I think maybe one thing, he's talking about open mat or class, maybe just do a small section. And, we go back to that quote we had about the golden rule. So at this school or these schools, I guarantee there's other people besides Rollo who want to do a little bit of stand-up, maybe talk to the teacher and say, hey, is it okay if me and Byron, work, start from, don't start from our knees or start from the ground. Can we start standing up? We'll use a small section of the mat. We'll be careful and make sure we don't roll into anybody. But I think that might be the first step is to, ask the instructor if that's okay. And it's only going to help you get better. It's going to add to your game. It's a win-win.
Another way to tackle this problem, you might consider that your instructor isn't super comfortable showing takedowns. If a lot of instructors, you start off playing some guard, you get your blue belt, you more guard, and then purple belt, and you're good enough sweeps, you could get on top. Like that's kind of how my game evolved. And without purposeful training, the takedown game, sometimes doesn't develop. And I remember back in the day at our first academy that we would train at, Gary, John would, on takedown days, turn it over to Lauren, who had very limited jiu-jitsu experience. One of the students, but a very good wrestler. And he'd say, you know what, today Lauren's going to show us a few takedowns. And John stepped aside. The teacher became a student, and we learned takedowns through another student. And that was a big move by somebody who just wanted to serve his customers, really. As we get back to the quote of the day, he wanted to show that. And maybe it could just be, hey, maybe we have, Bill or somebody else, he's got some really cool takedowns. Could he show those one day to class and kind of encourage that? Or maybe figure out what takedowns your instructor is comfortable teaching, or maybe go over some with that instructor in private or something, and get them their confidence to share those with the class and get them to develop their own takedown part of the game. Maybe they feel lacking in that category, and nobody wants to show stuff that they can't perform well. So maybe they need a little bit of help in that category. I don't know. It's hard to tell what's going on, and talking to your coaches, they'll be better able to serve you if you tell them what you would like out of your school.
Yeah, I think that's key, Byron, because I can see some schools not putting a big emphasis on takedowns because they think they are serving the students with what they want. Maybe they don't know there's guys in the class that are really interested in it. So tell your instructor you're interested and see where it goes.
Great point.
And then show up the day that you guys do takedowns.
Exactly.
If you want to have a beginner's class at your school and you never go to it to support it, you're not. You should be helping out, and you should support those new students as they come in, and support your coach and let them know that it's a worthwhile day. If you want to have a self-defense seminar, show up to that seminar. If you want to have a guest come in and teach a seminar, maybe a couple of guests come in and teach seminars, support those seminars when they come up, and it'll help the school be able to do more things like that. And if you're anywhere near Joe's school, there's a seminar going on March 7th.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. In fact, when this airs, it will be just a week or so away. So we're in Lake Jackson. We're 50 minutes south of Houston, and Byron and Jake Fox will be down to do back-to-back seminars, leg drag to back take and back control and back attack. So really looking forward to having you down here, Byron.
Yeah, we are both excited about this. It's dirt cheap. We're jam-packing it full of information and designing it to help you guys get the most out of this. I'm really looking forward to meeting everybody down there and getting to know a lot of Joe's teammates and getting to know people in the Houston area that listen to the podcast. If you're in the Houston area and you're available on the 7th, we'd love to meet you. We'd love to train with you, and we'll have a good time. So check it out. There'll be a link in the show notes to it. You'll also find just the general page on the BjjBrick website. You could reserve your spot as well. So, man, we're excited to come down there and to share some of our jiu-jitsu. And Joe's been gracious enough to help organize this quite a bit and do a lot of behind-the-scenes work. And man, thank you for that, Joe.
Looking forward to it, man.
I want to just give another quick shout out to our Patreon supporters. If you want to support the show, check out the link. We'll keep it simple. A lot of the questions today from the private Facebook group came from our Patreon supporters. If you are a Patreon supporter, you are invited to the group. We get the request to be invited, or request to be a member, and we will accept you. Or I'll send you an invite if I have you on Facebook. Man, I made that more complicated than I had planned.
Yeah, and a big shout out to everybody that participated in this episode. And those were some quality questions we had.
Yeah, we could have just rolled with that. Next time we do a topic episode, we just ask them to provide all the interesting topics.
That's a good plan.
It worked perfect.
Yeah.
But until next week, stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to change levels.
Train hard, train smart, get better, guys. We'll see you on the mats.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Welcome back to the BjjBrick Podcast. This is episode... Is that how I'm supposed to start off?
You're doing great, man.
Okay.
Works for me.
Okay, let's start it over
I've
again.
never been more proud of you, Kerry.